welcome everyone. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining this new Q&A session with Jitsuma Tenzin Palmo. So I'd like to give a warm welcome on behalf of everyone to Jitsumala, who is already with us. And thank you for being back with us again, Jitsuma, and answering all our questions in this case, in this particular instance regarding the topic of bodhicitta. But before we jump into the questions, I would like to just say to people, if they feel like making any offerings or donations to Jitsuma and her activities, and particularly to Donyo Gatsaling Nunnery, you can do it through our website, djlnunnery.com, if you feel inspired to do so. And also just to find out about information regarding the nunnery and all the things that Jitsuma does at tenzinpalmo.com. So before we actually go into the questions pertaining to this topic today, we're going to look at some of the questions that were left over from the previous sessions that we didn't get time to answer. So Jitsuma, if I can please request you to get started with the first question from the last time, and I'll read it to you. What can one do as a Western woman choosing to live a monastic life, but still having to work to sustain oneself, and because of that, not being able to fully choose the monastic life? It feels as if I'm living in between, not fully part of the worldly hustles anymore, neither being part of the ordained Sangha.
So, yes, this is, of course, a big problem for so many Western monastics, that because we do not live in a community, most Western monastics are living as individuals on quite a solitary life, or part of a Dharma organization, which is mostly for lay people. So indeed, they feel they're not part of, Western society on the one hand, but at the same time, they're also not part of a Buddhist monastic society either. So you kind of split between the two. This is a big, big problem. I mean, and it could take a whole, it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. We have an organization called the Alliance for Non-Himalayan Nuns, which does offer funding for specific Dharma courses and short retreats. But of course, we don't have the resources to offer actual financial support for individual nuns. And it should be remembered that also in Asia, unless you're actually living in a nunnery or a community, if you choose to stay behind, then mostly you're caught up in the family and end up working like a family servant. It's not that there is any particular support for nuns who are not within a monastic environment. So we are planning a 3-week training course in India, specifically really dealing with this whole question of nuns, Western nuns and other Asian nuns who are not part of a monastic community, which is probably 95%, if not more. And we know that there are hundreds of you out there. And we would like to hear from you. We invite you to come to this conference, which will be held probably in March 2024. And in the meantime, any suggestions that you can give us about what topics need to be covered and any solutions you can come up with for dealing with these problems, we'd be very, very happy to hear from you. So please do let us know any ideas, and if you can make it, then please do come to India. We have a place in Tosamling, which is a nunnery intended for non-Himalayan nuns, near to Dharamshala. And we welcome everybody, all the Western nuns out there who feel alienated from, they don't belong quite anywhere. And we want to hear from you. We want you to come and to tell us and to discuss between us and yourselves possible solutions, how to transform your solitary dwelling into a monastic situation. But in the meantime, really, I think the only thing to do is to integrate the Dharma in your daily life. I mean, what else can we do? You know, to accept that this is the way things are, if one is not in a monastic community, of which there are so few. And we recognize that it is a difficult situation and often very lonely. And we know that. But you know, the only way to deal with it up to now has been to see our daily life, our daily workplace, as our opportunity for practice. For practicing the paramita, for practicing loving awareness, for bringing Dharma into daily life and into our everyday relationships. And in that way to bridge the gap that so often appears to be between a Dharma life and a worldly life, making worldly life into our Dharma life. And that's not just for monastics, that's for all of us.
Thank you very much, Jitsumala. And just to add to that, if anybody has any suggestions, you can send them by email to my own personal email, assistant@tenzinpalmo.com. I've also posted the links to the websites of the Alliance of Non-Himalayan Nuns and Tosanling Nunnery. So if there's any ideas, there's any queries that you might have about this potential training program that we're planning for the upcoming years, then we would really like to hear from you. So we can then move on, Jitsumala, to the next question, which says, if I find that my mind, which is very keen on doing and achieving, is now interested in starting Ngondro practice as a way to feel I am doing something substantial, moving towards a goal. I understand that the contradiction inherent in using realization of Buddha nature as a goal. So, when would you recommend Ngondro practice to a student? Is it essential? And if so, what would be the way to begin? Is personal instruction from a teacher required?
Well, you know, of course, personally, I feel that Ngondro practice is especially helpful if one can undertake it within a retreat environment. I mean, it's meant to be done as a kind of package deal within a few months. And it was never intended that we would, you know, do like 100 prostrations a day for the rest of our life until we've made up 100,000. It's intended to be a really very intense thrust forward for purification and creating auspicious karma and so forth. And it's not meant to be a burden. It's meant to be a real zap for clearing away the obstacles for doing one's main practice. That's the idea behind it. But, you know, in modern times, for different people, there are different circumstances under which we can take the Ngondro. It's not, what can I say? It's not like you finish 100,000 of everything and then zap, you're there, ready, you know. I mean, personally, when I lived in Lahore, the question asked was not, have you done a Ngondro, but how many Ngondros have you done? Because most of the least have done 6 to 8 to 10 to 15 Ngondros. And if you said one, they said, oh, right, so, you know, when you're doing your next. I'm not trying to discourage people, but it's not like it's some magic token. I think a far better preparation for our main practice, or even for doing a Ngondro practice, is to do some strong shamatha practice. Because shamatha, the calm abiding meditation, prepares the mind for our practice. It makes it, the mind calm, clear, the attention, where we put the mind, there the mind will stay. It will not be distracted. It will not be running all over the place. Even the commentaries on Ngondro say that you have to have a well-directed mind. If the mind is distracted, you can do a million mantras or practices and it won't affect the mind. It won't, the accomplishment will not come. Whereas if our mind is well directed and settled and well trained, we can train it. And then whatever practice we do will naturally have accomplishment. So what the whole point is to get the mind ready. And the best way to get it ready in this very distracted age in which we live is to do some basic shamatha or calm abiding meditation. Then when we try to do our Ngondro, our mind will settle there and it will be able to visualize, the refuge tree. It will be able to do Vajrasattva practice, really being able to, be absorbed and merged with the practice. That's the point. If we can absorb our mind and really merge the mind with the practice, and very quickly there will be accomplishment. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. It's not it's not some kind of magic that when you've done your Ngondro, then somehow everything's going to change. I mean, it's the mind that has to change. And, of course, as the questioner says, it's not about seeking a goal, right? I mean, this, of course, is just the ego playing games, right? So, it's, what can I say? Yeah, the whole idea of reaching somewhere, right, is based on the ego, right? Somehow we're going to accomplish something, right? However, just of itself, it doesn't mean that we're any closer to the goal, right? I mean, the point is, how are we going to tame our mind? How are we going to train and transform the mind? This is the question. And I think that the more important than doing 100,000 belly flops and your mind all over the place, the best thing would be first to get the mind quiet, centered, one-pointed, and really, and many lamas are saying this now, because they see that the Western mind, especially the modern mind, not just the Western mind, the modern mind is so distracted. And that before you did your Ngondro, then you did shamatha. Now they are saying, do shamatha first, then do Ngondro, then do shamatha again. And so I would say not about goal, not about ego, but about our poor little distracted monkey mind. First, tame the monkey. Then you have a happy little monkey that's willing to do whatever tricks you want it to do, including 100,000 belly flops.
Wonderful. That's a very nice reminder of the essentials, Jitsumala. Thank you. Thank you very much. It can be even the Ngondro before the Ngondro, isn't it?
Well, I mean, many lamas now have recognized that this is not Tibet, where life was so slow and essentially empty in the sense of stimulus, mental stimulus. And therefore, half the battle was already over because the mind very easily settled. This is not true anymore for everybody, including Tibetans. And they are recognizing that first we need to heal the mind, get a well-balanced, healthy mind, which is able to practice wholeheartedly.
Thank you so much, Jitsumala. So we'll go to the last question, which was left over from last time, saying, how to best respond to questions posed by interested friends and family who are not practitioners of Buddhism or the Dharma when one feels entirely unqualified to answer?
Well, I mean, obviously, who is qualified to answer? So, I mean, if we never answer just because we felt unqualified, then nobody would ever transmit the Dharma. So I think it's best to just answer according to one's own knowledge and ability and explain that one is not really qualified, to answer properly, but one will do one's best. So there's no harm in saying, I don't really know, but, and trying to explain it as far as one's understanding goes, right? And in the meantime, one should be reading and studying and practicing more so as to gain confidence in answering accurately, right? I mean, we do the best we can. There is a story in the Pali Canon where Shariputra and Moggallana, who were the chief disciples of the Lord Buddha, in the beginning they were just Brahmin students and friends, and they said, let's go and we will meet as many teachers as we can, and then if we meet a teacher we really believe in, we'll tell the other one, and we'll both go to that teacher. And so either Moggallana or Sariputra, they meet this monk who they think looks like a very dignified being, and they say to him, well, you are very glowing and radiant. Who is your teacher? Can you tell us what your teacher has told you? And the monk said, well, I'm only a very new student, so I really don't know very much. And so then Shariputra said, well, it doesn't matter, whatever you know, you tell us. And then he said the very famous phrase, etc., that the Tibetans use as almost like a mantra. And it means that all things coming from a cause, the Buddha has explained the cause and also how things cease to be. Thus spoke the Mahashramana, the great sage. And when that's, it doesn't really say much. But when Shariputra heard it, it really clicked and he gained a great level of realization. And then he met with Moggallana and they went to meet with the Buddha. So, what spurred him was a very, very short, simple expression of the Buddha's teaching. But it was enough to get him motivated to learn more. So it doesn't mean that just because we don't know much, we can't express what we know. We're confident, that much we know. We don't know much, but this much.
Sounds wonderful, Jitsuma. Yeah, I guess we never know when we can inspire somebody and when somebody's ready to hear.
Exactly that. We don't know. We don't know. And even just a small thing, like, where the Buddha said, that all conditioned things are impermanent. Maybe that will really click for somebody, He talked about impermanence and the difficulties of our worldly life and how the solution is within our hearts and not necessarily external circumstances. That alone, simple as it might seem, is actually very profound and might direct people in really transform their lives to recognize the problem is within us and can be dealt with rather than always blaming other people and external circumstances. You never know where it's going to click. And it doesn't mean they become Buddhists, but they can nonetheless, deepen their understanding of their life, which is good.
Thank you very much, Itsumala. So now we can move on to the core questions pertaining to the actual topic of this Q&A session, marked Bodhichitta, the Bodhisattva aspiration. So before we do, I just want to say to everyone who sent in questions and participated of this Q&A that not to get discouraged if your question didn't make the cut for this particular one. We left some of the questions that were not necessarily connected to the topic aside, but on the next Q&A, we will do a more general one. And so we will take from all the questions that remain. So if you've already sent a question, maybe wait for the next Q&A to come. And if you haven't, please do send more questions, because we really need more material to ask Jitsumala, all these sort of things. So let's go to the first question then, which is pertaining to the topic, which says, what does bodhicitta mean? I know that the translation is mind of enlightenment, but what kind of mind is it?
Okay, so bodhicitta literally means the mind, the citta, that aspires to enlightenment or awakening, bodhi, in order to liberate all sentient beings, however long it takes. Right? It's that aspiration that we are seeking enlightenment, not just for the sake of ourselves, but in order to liberate all beings, right? So therefore, our practice is for the sake of others' benefit and not just for ourselves, right? And it's based on a deep compassion, recognizing the universal state of samsaric dissatisfaction and suffering. Basically, in the Mahayana, there are three what are called scopes of motivation. When people practice the spiritual path, the first scope is that we are hoping it's going to make us feel happier and better. That we meditate because we're told meditation makes the mind happy and more tamed and more peaceful, and we think that sounds really nice. So, you know, and then we have various psychological problems, and we hope somehow that learning how to tame our mind will help us to overcome our psychological suffering. And so also many people practice in order that, well, this lifetime might be tough, but next lifetime, if I'm good, I'll go to heaven. And so there's also that aspiration that, you know, again, somehow we're going to make samsara more comfortable. And many people practice because, you know, if they are good and generous and patient, then also they're making good karma. So next lifetime, the circumstances of being reborn will be more pleasant and not so many problems as they've had in this lifetime. So many people practice basically with this aspiration within samsara, not hoping to go beyond samsara. At least may samsara be a little bit more easy and comfortable and pleasant. So that's the first scope. And in all religions, many people practice with the aspiration that, you know, that next life, in, you know, whether as a round of lifetimes or just the next lifetime, that's it, that it will be, they will go to heaven, or that their ordinary worldly life will be easier. So the second scope is that recognizing whether we're up or whether we're down, we're all in the prison house of samsara, and you never know where you're going to end up. You know, just because you're a good person in this lifetime, maybe there's some very negative karma from another lifetime, and that will appear next life. And so even though you've been very good in this lifetime, you might still have problems next life. And basically, whether you're in the penthouse suite or the dungeons, you're all in prison. And we don't know whether we're going to go up or whether we're going to go down. It's very, very insecure. And so therefore the aspiration to get out of the prison house of samsara, to attain nirvana. And so this is the second scope, and especially in the present day, the example of that would be most of the practitioners in the Theravada school, where the aspiration is to attain nirvana by dropping the grasping at an ego, going beyond the self to selflessness and becoming liberated. Then the third scope is that, all right, this samsara is like a burning house. I've escaped, but my family are still in the burning house. My dog is still yelping away in the burning house. Can I just walk away? Or should I use the fact that I've gotten out the burning house to go back in and help pull people out? Or like if we were all sinking in a vast swamp, then by making great efforts we get onto dry land. Could we then turn around and see all our family and our friends and our loved ones and say, well, sorry folks, you know, I realize you're all drowning in the swamp, but I got out, and so if you really make lots of efforts, you can get out too. Let me be your example. So sorry about that. In the meantime, bye. And just walk off. I mean, we couldn't do that. We would have to take the fact that we're on dry land as a reason for helping to try to pull them out of onto dry land. And since all sentient beings have been related to us in past lives as close family, then that means we have the obligation to try to pull all beings onto dry land. That's the only reason for being on dry land, is that we are able to pull others out too. So that aspiration, the third aspiration, is the Mahayana aspiration called the Bodhichitta. And once that aspiration has arisen in our mind stream, we start on the path of a bodhisattva.
Sounds like a massive undertaking, Jitsumala.
It's enormous.
It also brings some nuances to the word enlightenment.
Oh, it's enormous, but that's why you take it. Because, you know, it's just so mind-blowing to the ego, that wants to be comfortable and safe, that it's an incredible explosion in our sense of our own personal well-being, to make that vow to come back endlessly until samsara ends.
So let me do something unexpected, Jitsumala. Since you mentioned already being on dry land in order to be able to help others, I'm going to jump to the last question on the list that we have. So number 9, which says, why is it that we aspire to become enlightened in order to be able to benefit others? Can't we start benefiting people now? So in connection with that, those two analogies that you gave, is it possible to be able to help others while we're still in the swamp or while we're still in the house which is burning?
Of course, we start right now by trying to benefit others as best we can, right? I mean, while we are unenlightened, it's very difficult to totally enlighten others, but we can set them on the path and we can share with them what we have. Of course, you know. So, I mean, by helping others and being concerned, even every prayer, every practice we do, we remind ourselves we're doing this on behalf of all the other beings in the world who don't know how to do this practice. Right? You understand? When we say our mantras, we remind ourselves we are doing this for all beings, because most beings don't know how to do these practices, how to do this. So this is why we are doing it, for their sake, not just for our own sake. And so that shifts the whole emphasis of and importance of the practice. We start right now with what we've got, with what we can do, right? Because that's how we're going to gain enlightenment. It's by taking all beings with us. For example, talking about the Ngondro, when we do prostrations, we visualize all beings, including animals and insects and birds and fish, all beings, likewise doing prostrations along with us. This huge plateau in which we are prostrating to the refuge tree, and all the beings, our parents and our loved ones and our friends and our enemies in front, and then all beings, all prostrating along with us at the same time. And we are like their sub. We are like, it's like if you go to United Nations, right? You have representatives of all the different nations. The whole nation doesn't go to the UN. They send a representative. And that representative speaks on behalf of their people, right? So therefore, when we're doing practice, we are the representative for all the sentient beings who aren't present at this particular occasion, but we are acting on their behalf. And all the merit that has been dedicated through the practice is given again to all sentient beings for their enlightenment and well-being. So right from the start, we take all beings with us, right? And however, since we are ignorant, not enlightened, and still trapped in the prison house, we travel towards the goal, if there is a goal, at least by our sense of interconnection with all beings. That normally because of our ignorant dualistic mind, we see ourselves separate. But on the ultimate level, we are all very deeply interconnected. Our consciousness is all very, very deeply connected with all living beings. So in practicing and remembering that we are doing this on behalf of living beings, it is also a step towards recognizing and remembering our interconnection, right? So the point is that we in order to waken up, we need both great compassion and great wisdom. The two of them together, like the wings of the bird. And so this, by always including sentient beings in our practice, we are cultivating both the compassion side, because all beings want to be happy and liberated, and at the same time the wisdom side of recognizing that we are at a deeper level very intimately interconnected. So yes, you start right now, I mean, do what you can to benefit beings and at the same time benefit oneself by benefiting beings. I mean, I think that's common sense, it seems to me.
Nothing's stopping us from being better every day, is it?
Exactly.
Okay. I think I'm going to do it again, Jitsumal. I'm very, very sorry, but you just mentioned great compassion, that we need great compassion and great wisdom in order to attain enlightenment. So I'm going to jump to question number 5, which says exactly that. I've heard that great compassion is a prerequisite for bodhicitta and ultimately for enlightenment. Could you please explain what great compassion means and why is it so important to develop it? And if I may add to that, Jitsamala, what is the difference between just compassion, plain compassion, and great compassion?
Well, great compassion really means unconditional compassion. Right? In other words, a compassion that reaches out to embrace all sentient beings, right? All living beings without any exception. So living beings means not just human beings, but animals, birds, beings that live in the waters, the oceans and the rivers, insects, maybe even microbes, all sentient beings, seen and unseen. So all the many realms of beings that we cannot visually see with our eyes. All beings. Since we all have Buddha potential, right? Even insects have Buddha potential, but are mostly caught in our dualistic consciousness. How sad. We all have this incredible innate wisdom and compassion within us, but we don't recognize it. And so we suffer and we cause suffering to others. I mean, that's incredibly sad. So therefore, may all beings be free of suffering and gain liberation. That's the aspiration. It doesn't have anything to do with people I like or people I know, and against people who do bad things, and therefore I don't have any compassion for them. It's all beings. People do bad things because of their ignorance, and they create terrible karma for themselves. How sad when their potential is total omniscience and loving kindness. Why are they trapped? Right? Why are they all trapped? When we open the prison doors, it's to allow all the prisoners to escape, including the guards. Everybody, get out of there, right? As soon as you can. So this great compassion, it just means an unconditional compassion. It doesn't say, I have compassion for everybody except that one. It means everybody. Everybody, all beings, without even a single exception anywhere, including Mara, who represents the satanic force in Buddhism. The forces opposing enlightenment. Even Mara will be liberated in the end. All beings will be liberated. And that's the difference between an ordinary conditional compassion, which is mostly sorry about somebody's, suffering in this particular part of samsara. It has much, it's vast and open and beyond time and beyond space. Because you've got the whole galaxies, all those galaxies to liberate, it goes on and on.
Well, again, it's enormous, but what a beautiful aspiration, what a beautiful mind to cultivate.
It is a mind-blowing aspiration because it's beyond thought. I mean, our logical thought cannot encompass it, but the famous verse in Shantideva, right, which says, "For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world." And whenever, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, when he quotes that vote, that aspiration, he often just bursts into tears. Because it's such an incredible aspiration, for as long as space endures and living beings remain, so I will remain to help them, to be there for them, and to liberate them. And so it's so beyond time and space. I'm not here just to benefit myself or to be liberated or any of that. I'm just here solely in order to gain the skillful means, the wisdom and the compassion to benefit every single being as far as we can in all time and all space. So it's a mind-blowing, literally a very, very mind-blowing aspiration, and whether you can do it or not is not the question. The question is the aspiration to go beyond the conceptual thinking mind, which says, no, you can't do that. Right? The inner mind, the true nature, says it's already done. We just don't realize it yet.
I heard one Lama say that of all the wishes that we can have, of all the aspirations in the world, this Bodhichitta aspiration is the one which connects us most with reality and with how things really are.
Yes.
So that also makes sense.
On a relative level, and also on an ultimate level. So there's relative bodhicitta, there's ultimate bodhicitta.
So since the whole bodhicitta mind is connected also, and the topic of our Q&A is the bodhisattva aspiration, we have question number 2, which says, what makes someone a bodhisattva? Is taking the Bodhisattva vow enough?
Well, taking the Bodhisattva vow, of course, is very important because it plants the seed of aspiration, right? Without the seed, you can keep watering, but you're not going to get any plant because you've not planted the seed. So first you need to plant the seed, which is taking the Bodhisattva vow. And then we need to water it, right? And protect the sapling little Bodhi tree, the little Bodhi tree sapling that's growing in our heart. we have to take care of it, protect it, water it, fertilize it, and so forth, so that it will continue to grow and grow, right? So in the meantime, we are what you could call incipient bodhisattvas, right? We're aspiring to continue on the bodhisattva path until all beings are established in Buddhahood. So the point is that every day we recite the three jewels. I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And then the aspiration for enlightenment through, generosity and the other paramita, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So the first thing you do is to take refuge and repeat the Bodhisattva vow, that you are doing this practice for the sake of gaining spiritual maturity enough to be of genuine benefit to liberate others. In all our lifetimes, from now until all beings are liberated, I will take the Mahayana path, and may I in all my future lifetimes meet again and again and again with the Buddha Dharma and with the Bodhisattva path, and have both faith and the opportunity for practice and for gaining realization. That's the point. So we make these aspirations now, right? So that we can die in the confidence that we will meet again with the Bodhisattva path, right? I mean, like our little nuns coming, 3-4 years old. I mean, obviously, they had made very strong aspirations in past lifetimes that as soon as it was possible, they ended up in a nunnery where they are being taught and trained and practiced, and from the very beginning, learning about the Bodhisattva path. I mean, one group of little nuns that we got after just a few weeks, there was this, somebody said to one of the little nuns, maybe she was 6-7 years old, and they said to her, "Oh, isn't it nice that you're in this nunnery, because now you can pray for your mummy and daddy?" And she said, "Oh no, in this nunnery, we pray for all sentient beings." Well, at 6 or 7, if you've got that already there in your heart, that's the result of previous aspirations in past lives. So start aspiring, right? And planting seeds and watering very carefully.
Sounds really good, Jitsumala. For all of us, planting seeds definitely is the beginning. But going back to the question, Jitsumala, is there anything in particular any signs that a bodhisattva had? Do they glow in the dark? Can we recognize one when we see a bodhisattva? Is there any way to know that somebody is a bodhisattva, or
no, not really.
Something internal?
No, I mean, usually we say if we find someone who is selflessly doing wonderful work for the benefit of others, we say, oh, they must be a bodhisattva. Because, of course, you don't have to be a Buddhist to be a bodhisattva. I mean, you don't even have to be religious to be a bodhisattva on one level. But the difference between just being a very kind, compassionate person and being a bodhisattva is not to forget the aspiration is to attain enlightenment. Not just to be kind, right? That's the point. That we're cultivating not just compassion, but also wisdom, right? So a genuine bodhisattva would be someone who not only had a very, very good, kind heart, but also had some innate qualities of insight and understanding. It's not just about being kind. I mean, this is why the image of the 1,000-armed Chenrezig Kuan Yin Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, in his 1,000 arms, which are reaching out to help, in each hand there is an eye, right? Because he doesn't just have compassion, he also has the wisdom and understanding of how to use that compassion to benefit others. Right? So the two have to go together. It's an aspiration towards awakening, towards enlightenment, not just towards, being on a mundane plane. You can be very kind, but it's also a spiritual aspiration.
I think that definitely connects with the next question, which you might have already answered in part, but I'll read it anyway. Number 3 says, like many people, I hope to do some good in this lifetime. Future lifetimes appear very remote indeed. If the wheel of life is true, then I cannot expect rebirth in a favorable world. The Bodhisattva vow seems so huge and remote to accept all at once. Does Bodhichitta mean a desire to ultimately be a Bodhisattva in terms of helping people out of the burning building? And then after many suitable lifetimes, it would be time to take the Bodhisattva vow?
Again, as I say, we start right now, right? If we are using this lifetime skillfully to benefit not only ourselves but others, and to cultivate the aspiration to again and again meet with the Dharma and again be in a position to renew the Bodhisattva vow towards enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Then whether or not there are future lives or no future lives, you've set the GPS, right? That's the point. Right? In the meantime, you can, your GPS is enlightenment for the sake of all beings, but meantime, you're looking at the scenery around you, right? You're not just thinking of your distant goal. You're thinking right now, what's the road ahead, just ahead, and what the scenery is on either side, So that's the point. Right now, you're trying to perfect this lifetime. And then with the Bodhisattva aspiration, the Bodhisattva vow, then future lives will take care of themselves. There's no reason why, if there's a wheel of life, you will not get a favorable rebirth. Why would you get a bad rebirth unless you've been really evil and delighting in that evil? The average person doing their best that they can in this lifetime, considering that we are immersed in ignorance, but we're doing our best, can hope that for sure we will have a favorable rebirth, at least as a human being, and that we will, as a human being, again meet with the Dharma path and have faith in it and the opportunity to practice. But that will all come about only if we take care of this lifetime now. Right? We can't deal with what's going to happen next, but we can do what's happening right now. So we set our aspiration for enlightenment for all sentient beings, that's the GPS, and then we are dealing with the road just ahead of us and what's passing in this moment, and keeping our attention here and now. Then if we do that, then eventually we will reach to our wish, however many lifetimes that may take. The point is, future lifetimes are not in our hands unless we take care of the present moment. And that we can do. We can deal with the present moment and allow the future to unfold as it will.
Thank you, Jitsumala. That sounds very sensible and practical, pertaining to now, actually. So then let me move on to question number 4. Saying, why is bodhicitta not talked about in the Pali Canon? I've read many discourses of the Buddha, but there seems to be no mention of this term.
Well, actually the ideal of aspiring for Buddhahood rather than merely as an arahat attaining nirvana does appear in the Pali Canon. This was the Buddha Shakyamuni's original intention as a bodhisattva. He's called a bodhisattva until he becomes a Buddha. But it was considered too difficult. And so therefore the aspiration for personal liberation, nibbana, was emphasized. And it was only maybe later, or whenever you want to argue it, that the Mahayana, then compassion, was emphasized along with wisdom. That, you know, therefore the analogy of rescuing people from burning houses or, you know, drowning in swamps came about. The motivation, why are we practicing, is the main divergent point between the schools. That's it. Otherwise, you know, we all do shamatha, we all do vipassana, you know, the monks and nuns all keep vinaya. You know, there's not that much difference actually in practice, the basic practices. But the big difference is why we are doing those practices. That is where they diverge, right? So, for the aspiration that one is not traveling the path just for the sake of one's own liberation, but to be of ultimate benefit to all beings. It's such an enormous vow. But it sets our motivation away from what could end up being a rather self-cherishing view. That, you know, this prison house of samsara is horrible, I want to get out. To thinking, well, this prison house of samsara is really awful, not just for me, but for everybody. So if I could find a way out, then I could help everybody else to get out too. So that's what I've got to do. I've got to find a way out and then get everybody else out first.
So it sounds to me, Jetsamala, that the whole thing is very internal, that one could, for example, just to make it obvious, one could be a Mahayana practitioner by reciting the prayers, attending the rituals, doing the pujas, but internally, if one is thinking only of my own liberation, then that's not really the Mahayana aspiration. And on the other hand, you could have a Theravada monk in a Theravada country that aspires for full enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, and even though externally it looks one way, internally the aspiration is greater, right?
Exactly that. You can be practicing the highest Anuttara Yoga Tantra, but if it's for the sake of you know, cultivating only yourself and you've forgotten to take all sentient beings with you, then it's what would be called a Hinayana practice. I mean, Theravada in itself is just one of the many, many schools set out by the Buddha. The reason why it has existed to the present day so immaculately is because the Emperor Ashoka sent his son and his daughter to Sri Lanka. And so they established Buddhism of the Theravada school there. And then when Buddhism died out in India, that was the school, the Theravada school was the only one of the 18 schools where it survived, apart from those which were then sent subsequently to China, and from China to Vietnam, Korea, and Japan, and then, of course, to Tibet. So it was a historical factor, and there were many schools. There were 18 basic subsects. Theravada was just one, but that is the one which has existed because it was sent to Sri Lanka, and from Sri Lanka to Burma and Thailand and elsewhere. But indeed, if it's all a matter, it's not the practice or the appearance, it's the inner motivation which counts.
So moving on to the next question, number 6. We talk about generosity, giving, sharing, and helping as best we can. But also at the same time in the Dhammapada it goes, no one purifies another, never neglect your work for another's, however great his need. As a lay practitioner, I most often find it very hard where the middle point of this two. Generosity and self-practice. Do we ultimately help others just to help ourselves?
Well, of course, by helping others, we do help ourselves. I mean, although it's not the primary motivation, nonetheless, we help ourselves by cultivating a good heart, right? Which rejoices in the happiness of others, right? So this does create good karma. Yes, it does. And this is not a bad thing. It's perfectly right you know, to when we give happiness to others, we feel happy, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with feeling happy because we make, you know, we've made others happy. And we need good karma, right, to clear obstacles on the path and create auspicious circumstances for the practice of Dharma. It's like breathing in and breathing out, right? You breathe in to benefit yourself, you breathe out to benefit others. And that makes a very balanced practice, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. You know, I mean, as Shantideva says, if you want to be miserable, then only think about your own happiness. If you want to be happy, then think about the happiness of others. And so it's true, you know, if we are kind and nice and try to benefit others, we ourselves benefit. I mean, that's perfectly how it should be. But we should not only benefit others and completely deprive ourselves. I mean, like some people are out of balance between their compassion and their wisdom. And they have too much feeling for others and guilt about being nice to themselves. And they think that's self-cherishing mind. But it's actually only common sense. If we are kind to ourselves, we can also be kind to others. So there needs to be a balance, not only thinking of ourselves, but also not only thinking of others. We are also sentient beings, and we have to take care of all sentient beings. It didn't say all sentient beings except me. All sentient beings, right? And we are a sentient being which we need to take care of. But along with that, we can also extend that caring and that compassion and love towards all beings. Then we feel good, and they feel good, and everybody's happy.
Thank you very much, Itzumala. So now we can go to question number 7. Can you talk about the 2 methods for developing bodhicitta and how to know which one is more suitable for me? How can I put them into practice in a formal meditation setting? And if I can add to this question a little bit now that you've mentioned it, if you could also talk about ultimate and relative bodhicitta as well.
Well, relative bodhicitta, we'll start with that. Relative bodhicitta, that means the aspiration to attain awakening for the sake of all beings. And here we are making a separation between ourselves and all sentient beings. So it's relative, right? It's dealing with a conditional mind, which is ego-based, and the idea that I am going to save all beings, right? I mean, it's a very lovely aspiration, but it's very relative. It's very conditional, right? Ultimate bodhicitta means the nature of the mind. The pure nature of the mind, like the sky, has no boundaries and no separation. So on an ultimate level, we all realize that we already have what it is that we are aiming for. We just haven't recognized it yet. This is our problem. We all have the Buddha potential within us, but we don't realize it. When we realize it, then we are at one with the ultimate non-dual nature of primordial consciousness, and that is that. So, you know, where we work from, because we have not realized emptiness and we have not realized the luminous quality of the mind, of our own and all beings' mind, and how interconnected our consciousness is, we have to start from where we are, which is on the relative plane. And through walking on the relative path, it will open out into full awakening. When we are fully awakened, we will realize all beings are awakened. But at the moment, we seem like we're all very much immersed in ignorance. What to do? So as to these, where is it? These 2 methods of traditionally of arousing bodhicitta. Right, so one is the 7 causes and effects, which was originated with Maitreya and taught by Atisha. And the other is exchanging self and others, which was taught by Shantideva and was originally inspired by Manjushri. So the first one, the one about 7 causes and effects, in brief, it's based on our sense of infinite gratitude towards our mother. Now, in modern days, especially in the West, many people put all their blame for their problems on their mothers, poor mother. And so it doesn't really work because they're still working out the tangle of their feelings about their mother. But traditionally, the idea was, after all, the mother gave us birth. We have a human life because of our mother. She could have chosen to abort us, but she didn't. She took us and she held us in her womb for 9 months, and then she went through the extremely hazardous process of giving birth. When we were small babies, completely helpless and totally relying on the mother and her milk and her care and her love and her cleaning us and looking after us and soothing us, she was there for us. So therefore, that gratitude is something which we can never really repay. And so then we thinking of with great love of our mothers, the idea is, then we recognize that we've had countless lifetimes in which all beings at some point or other played the role of being our mother. Even if it was a codfish who gives birth to thousands and thousands of babies all in one time, nonetheless, those babies, the little baby codfish, only came about because the mother gave birth to them. So in whatever form the mother was, she was there as the cause of us having a birth. And so therefore, we have to remember that all these beings that we don't know at some point were the most intimate person in our lives. And we've just forgotten, that's all. So then we can think of the mother, we can think of her kindness, how she took care of us, how she brought us up, and so forth. And from that, then we want to say thank you. We want to repay their kindness. We want to give them something back, something compared with the incredible gift that they gave us of a birth. And so we think great love towards the mother and how kind she's been to us in all this time. And from that, we think the mother, how she's suffering right now, how difficult life is for her, how, even if she wasn't nice to us, it's because she herself has lots of problems, outer and inner. And so then we feel great compassion. Poor mother, if only she could be free from suffering and filled with happiness and well-being. And then we resolve, well, right now I cannot help my mother because I myself am still immersed in ignorance. But all these mothers out there, all these sentient beings with whom I had at one time such an intimate connection, right now I can't do much for helping them. But I resolve that in future lifetimes I will walk on this path of a bodhisattva, I will gain more wisdom and more compassion, and ultimately I definitely will liberate them all from the prison house of samsara. So that's how you sit down, you go for each point, you think about it, you try to really feel in your heart what it's saying about how we are so interconnected through so many lifetimes with all these sentient beings. I mean, even if we saw ourselves in our last life, we wouldn't recognize ourselves, or in the future. Who's that? Maybe different gender, maybe not human. We don't know. We wouldn't recognize ourselves. We think we're who we look like now, but that's very transient, like a guest house that you stay in a few days and you leave. So what to speak of our mothers, who we just don't recognize anymore, but at some point they were the most closest thing in our life for us. So that's how you sit and you think about it. You can read about it and contemplate it. If you have problems with mothers, you can try exchanging self and others. which again means that you just imagine yourself as that other person, what they're going through, what they're feeling, their whole attitude to life, their problems, their difficulties. Imagine you were that person. How would you feel? And how would you feel towards the other, meaning our present self, right? How would you like, as the other, to be treated by oneself, right? So you're like mirroring each other, right? So if you see somebody, especially if they're being difficult or in trouble, you imagine yourself as them and how they're feeling in this moment and how they're feeling towards the person you've just left, which is yourself at this time, right? How you would like that person to act. So in that way, you just exchange roles. Sometimes that's easier. But it reminds us that everybody acts because of causes and conditions. We don't know what's brought about the causes and conditions to cause them to act the way they're acting right now. And how they would feel about you if you were them.
So I'm trying to connect the dots here a little bit, Sumala. Will these two methods of cultivating bodhicitta, will they cultivate only the relative bodhicitta, or are they also connected with the cultivation of wisdom and the realization of ultimate bodhicitta?
I think it's mainly dealing with the relative bodhicitta, because we are still dealing with personalities. We're still dealing with people. And ultimate bodhicitta goes beyond the ego, right? The whole point of ultimate bodhicitta is that it's beyond the dualism of self and other, right? And is recognizing the deep interconnection between all our consciousness that we normally divide, right? There's me, there's you, there's him, her, but ultimately it's not like that.
And finally, just to deal with all the pairs that we have, if you could also talk about aspirational and engaged bodhicitta, and in engaged bodhicitta, if you could maybe talk a little bit about the paramitas, so that we just have an overview of what actually engaging in the bodhisattva deeds is.
Yes, well, I mean, I think it's very important. That's an important point, because in the West especially, when people say Buddhism, people think meditation. And sometimes they get a shock when they come to Asia and discover that very, very few people actually meditate, including monks. And so even in the sutras, there are, even the Four Noble Truths on the path, the truth of the path, had to do with conduct, had to do with speech, as well as to do with the mind. Mindfulness and meditation was only a part of that path. There was also ethics and right effort and many, many aspects, right speech, right action, right livelihood. The Buddha included right livelihood, not just right action, as part of the Noble Eightfold Path. So later this was developed in both the Pali Canon and in the Mahayana Sutras as the parami or the paramita, meaning those actions which, if conjoined with wisdom, are direct causes of awakening. And so this includes things like generosity and sharing, and ethical conduct, non-harming, and patience, not getting upset and angry when people and circumstances seem adverse to my wishes, and so forth. And again, meditation is only one step on that journey. And the crowning paramita is, of course, the prajna paramita, the wisdom paramita, which recognizes that on an ultimate level, there's no ego involved in all of this. That by acting in a non-dualistic consciousness, that will fulfill not only the qualities needed for engaging in the awakening, but also the actual wisdom which will light the flame. So all these qualities are needed, like generosity and sharing, ethical conduct, being patient in the face of adverse circumstances, and so forth. All these are very, very essential on the path to enlightenment. It's not just sitting and meditating. We have to bring the Dharma into our daily life, make our daily life our Dharma practice. And everything which comes, whether it's pleasing or unpleasing, all of it is fodder for the flame of enlightenment, which is going to burn in our hearts. So we need to cultivate everything which happens to us and make it into our Dharma practice for the sake of benefiting all beings and creating the causes and conditions for awakening in ourselves and in others, throughout time and space.
Thank you, Jetsunmala. That's a beautiful description, and I think we've covered all the pairs related to bodhicitta with that, so thank you so much. And so we have one final question. We've covered all of the rest, so we'll end with number 8. One of my main obstacles regarding bodhicitta is trying to imagine all sentient beings. It seems too huge, unfathomable, too abstract. So how can we cultivate this sense of closeness towards all sentient beings if we can't really grasp what all sentient beings means?
Okay, so sentient beings simply means all beings who have consciousness, right? All living beings. And that means everybody, everything, right? It's as I said, it's not just human beings. It's all living beings that we meet with. I mean, animals, birds, fish, insects, anything. We all have consciousness. I mean, I think it's very fascinating that even nowadays, neuroscientists are recognizing that all these beings, however disparate their outer form may be, we all share the same consciousness. And that is what means a sentient being. So the cultivation of bodhicitta is intended to blow our minds, right? I mean, that's the whole point. It's to expand our hearts beyond the usual confines of people and animals that we know and care for in this very lifetime. Right? That's the whole point. It expands our heart and mind because it is unfathomable and beyond thought. Right? That's it. Right? It's not like I'm going to love these people and the others, well, they don't count. I will liberate all human beings, but animals and fish and birds don't count. That's not that. I liberate everyone, but not mosquitoes. It's not that. All beings have Buddha potential. All beings have consciousness. And so that's the point. We're leaving behind our comfort zones and making aspirations for inconceivable lifetimes to come. Right? We're setting our GPS into unfathomable ages to come. In unfathomable times, who knows? So I think that, again, we should remember that verse, right? For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. That beyond thought aspiration, we send it out, right? That's the point, right? And we start from where we are right now, right? cultivating kindness in daily life and trying to implement the paramitas, like generosity and patience, towards all whom we meet, right? This lifetime, we do the best we can. That's all. And we aspire to continue on the Bodhisattva path for as long as it takes, which means forever.
May it be so, Jitsumala.
May it be so. And the point is that right now we do what we can with what we've got. And we leave the future to take care of itself if our aspiration is as pure as we can make it for this lifetime. It's not going to be perfect because we're not perfect. And it's relative because the Bodhisattva vow itself is relative. But it leads to something which is genuinely beyond thought and beyond our little ego's scope of what feels, comfortable for the ego. Because we're going beyond the ego. That's the whole point.
Thank you so much, Jitsumala. Perhaps it would be suitable for this particular topic that we've been covering, if you can maybe explain to us what this means and this dedication for Bodhichitta, that maybe we can dedicate with this, the merit of this session and any positive potential that we created.
Yeah, so this is taken from the Bodhichitta Shantideva, and it's something which probably every single Tibetan knows by heart. It's a very simple aspiration prayer coming in his section on arousing the mind of enlightenment. This mind of enlightenment means bodhicitta. So in Tibetan it says, Chancha Sencho Rinpoche Mache Panam Jeju Che Che Panyampa Mepa Yang Goni Gontu Pewasho. And that means, in English, of course, may the supreme mind of enlightenment, the bodhicitta, grow where it has not grown. And where it has grown, may it remain undefiled and increase forevermore. Increase more and more and more. Gonne gontu pel means more and more and more may it flourish. So basically it's saying may this thought of bodhicitta arise in all those hearts where it has never arisen up to now. And may it be not contaminated by our self-cherishing mind, but instead may it flourish and increase enduringly throughout all ages and all times. So this is a very succinct but very beautiful aspiration to use, and especially it's used as a dedication at the end of a practice. This is recited. Yes, so Chancha Sencho Rinpoche Mache Panan Jeju Che Che Panampa Mepa Yang Goni Gontu Pewasho.
Thank you so much, Jitsuma Tenzin Palmo. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions, who participated of this question and answer session. We really appreciate your presence. We really appreciate your engagement. And just to remind everyone, if you want to support Jitsuma Tenzin Palmo and her activities, particularly Dongyu Gatseling Nunnery, I will leave a link in the chat where you can connect with the nunnery and different things that happen here. And if you feel inclined or inspired to make a donation, it's always appreciated. So thank you everyone again. Thank you so much, Jitsuma Tenzin Palmo, and until next time.